Welcome everyone to the video. Welcome to the channel. This is obviously coming out a day later than typical. And that's because as I was doing my practice run on the video, I just didn't like the script I wrote. I didn't like, it wasn't connecting. I felt like it just didn't make sense. So right back to the drawing board. I spent all evening rewriting this script, and I think I like it now. Now I like where it's going here. And the title of this one is The New Tower of Babel: AI and Humanity's Search for Identity. Tower of Babel is a story. I grew up Christian, so it's a story for me in the Christian Bible. Um, Obviously, the Jewish faith also knows the Tower of Babel, but imagine Imagine you're standing in the shadow of the Tower of Babel, a structure that stretches upward higher than anything you've ever seen before. With workers everywhere, just think of a construction site, built bricks moving back and forth, instructions being shouted out, and it's going to be dusty. And for the first time in human history, it probably feels like, anything is possible. Maybe that's, what fascinates me the most about this story. It's not the actual tower, not even, whether it happened exactly as it's written. What fascinates me is the feeling, because I think we've felt it before. I think we're feeling it right now. The feeling that humanity is standing on the edge of something enormous, something that could change everything, something that could really, redefine what it means to be human. Thousands of years ago, it was a tower. Today, I think that it might be AI or artificial intelligence. The funny thing about human beings is that, we're never satisfied for a very long time. Once we solve a problem, then immediately start chasing the next one. We cross a horizon, and then we immediately start looking for the next horizon. That's not really necessarily a flaw. It's one of our greatest strengths. Without that drive, we'd still be living in caves. But the same drive has a habit of convincing us that limitations are temporary, that every boundary only exists to be crossed, that every obstacle that's out there exists only to be overcome. And every so often, humanity finds a project that captures that spirit perfectly. A project so ambitious that it feels almost impossible. Think of, the pyramids, or, the moon landing, whether you believe it happened or not. Um, think of the internet and now AI. Each one a declaration, a statement, a way of saying, watch, this is what we can do. Watch what we can do. Now imagine being alive when the first skyscraper was built, or maybe, seeing an airplane, the first airplane take off, you know, picking up the phone and just hearing someone else's voice in another state or another, country. Every generation experiences a moment where, reality suddenly just becomes a lot larger. A moment where, yesterday's impossibility is today's normal. you know, can you- I can't, I could go on and on with different examples. And after a while, something, strange happens. We stop asking, whether we should be amazed. We start asking, what's next? The tower is never finished. Humanity simply builds another one or another one. Now, if you look around, machines, AI, writing books, creating arts, generating music. There's apps to create your own music. Obviously, answering questions, diagnosing diseases, and even writing software. Some of these are writing code, writing software, creating programs, programs creating programs. Things that only a few years ago sounded just like science fiction, and every week something new happens. Every month there's another breakthrough. Every year, the tower just grows taller. The strange thing isn't that AI even exists. The strange thing is how quickly we become just accustomed to it, because that's what humans do. We normalize these miracles. But this is really where the story kind of changes, because every tower before this one mostly extended what humans can do. Cars allowed us to travel faster. Planes allowed us to travel further. Computers, now we're doing calculations so quickly, and the information just made accessing information so easy. AI just feels a bit different because it isn't extending our physical muscles. It isn't, extending our reach. It's extending the very thing, we've always believed made us very unique, and that's our minds. And, that's where I think the real story begins, not with the technology, but with our identity. If you think about how often people, introduce themselves, we always ask, or they just freely give up what you do. I'm a writer, I'm a teacher, I'm engineer, police officer. I'm pretty sure a lot of programmers as well too. We often answer who we are with what we do. We build identity around usefulness, around skills or expertise. And for generations, that worked because humans were the only ones capable of doing these things. And now something new is happening. For the first time, many people are looking at a machine and wondering if it can do what I do. What makes me different? Not better. What makes different? And that's a very, old question disguised as a modern one. Maybe the Tower of Babel wasn't really about, reaching heaven. That was they were trying to build this tower to reach heaven, to reach God. Maybe it was about identity. Maybe the tower was humanity's way of proving something, proving what we could accomplish, proving what we could become, proving that there were, no limits. And maybe every tower we've built since then carried a bit of that same desire. Not just to build something, impressive, but to answer the question, who are we? The pyramids answered it in one way. The Roman Empire answered in another. The Industrial Revolution, the internet. AI is now offering its own answer. But here's the thought I can't shake. The people building AI often talk about making machines more human. What's that line from Blade Runner? More human than human? More intelligent, more creative, more capable. But what if the bigger challenge is the opposite? What if the real challenge isn't teaching machines to become more human? What if it's remembering what makes humans human in the first place? Because the more capable our technology becomes, the harder that question seems to be. And maybe that's why the story of Babel has survived for thousands of years, not because of the tower, not because, every generation eventually builds its own version of it. A project that's, so ambitious that it forces humanity to simply confront itself, to look into the mirror, to ask those difficult questions. Not about technology or power or our progress, but our identity, who we truly are. What are we becoming? And if one day we succeed in building a machine that can think as we do, or perhaps even better than us, the most important discovery may not be, what we learn about artificial intelligence. It may be what we learn about ourselves. Because every tower humanity has ever built eventually points back to the same question, not what we are capable of creating, but who are we becoming while we create it? And I'll leave it with that question there. Who are we becoming while we create it? That's the end of the video. A bit of a shorter one than I typically have been doing lately. I've been trying to make them a bit longer, adding hopefully not just, fluff, hopefully just something I'm adding more meaning to these the videos. Um but I've in my other social media, I often refer to AI as being our Tower of Babel, and that is one of the reasons why I wanted to now bring it here into into this realm, into this other channel, a realm, I like to say. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the content. If you do enjoy the content, please consider subscribing to continue to get content from me. Hitting the thumbs up, helps out. It likes the video and it helps to push this out there into YouTube world, YouTube land. But thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.